Hola, hola, class. Welcome to Unit 6. I am really happy you're here, and I want to start by saying that this week is very important. Why? Because in this unit, we're focusing on health topics, specifically how gender influences health, stress, and well-being. So this is a really interesting presentation. And it's based on chapter 8 and 9 from your textbook. So it is very critical that you read both chapters as you go through this lecture. Everything I'm explaining here comes from those chapters, and I'm helping you break it down so you can understand it and apply it. So as you go through these, I want you to take notes and really think about how this shows up in your life. Okay. And I want you to keep this question in mind. How does gender shape our health, our stress, and our well being? In your book, Chapter 8 focuses on physical health, including illness, patterns, life expectancy, and behaviors that affect health. Chapter 9 focuses on mental health, stress, and coping. The book explains that health is not just physical, it's also psychological and social. So I want you to write this down. Your mind and your body are always connected. For example, the book explains that stress can affect your immune system, your sleep, and your energy. And at the same time, healthy behaviors like exercise can improve your mood and mental health. So we're always looking at both sides together. Let's now connect these to what the book introduces, okay? So the book asks us to think about a very important pattern. Why do women report more health problems but live longer? And why do men report fewer problems but die younger? So this is something researchers have consistently found. So I want you to think about what the book is suggesting here. Is it that women are less healthy? Or is it that women are more aware of their health and more likely to report it? And is it that men are healthier or that they are less likely to seek help until something becomes serious? And this is where the book is pushing you to think beyond the surface. So I want you to think about that. The book calls this the gender health paradox. Women report more symptoms and more illness, but men have higher mortality rates. So the book explains that this is influenced by several factors. Biology plays a role. For example, hormones can affect disease risks. Behavior plays a role. For example, men are more likely to engage in risky behaviors like heavy drinkers drinking or smoking. So, for men, it's so much easier to engage into these behaviors. And then also social factors play a role here, such as gender expectations about strength and emotional expressions. So I want you to think about this. If someone avoids going to the doctor, ignores symptoms, and delays treatment, what could happen over time, right? So that's how behavior connects to health outcomes. In your book, I'm just noticing that my whole face is on the screen. So sorry about that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you my PowerPoint presentation or my Canva presentation um, in an announcement or something like that, just so you have it in case you want to see the letters that I am covering. So sorry about that. Okay, so mortality versus morbidity. In your book, you will see these two terms a lot. So, mortality means death rates, and morbidity means illness or disease. The research the book discusses shows that women tend to have higher morbidity, meaning more reported illness, and men tend to have higher mortality, meaning higher death rates, right? So I want you to write this down clearly. Morbidity is about being sick. Mortality is about dying. The book uses these to explain why women may report more health issues but still live longer. For example, women may seek treatment earlier and manage illness over time. Men, on the other side, may delay care, which can lead to more severe outcomes. So think about how behavior influences these patterns. The book explains that women tend to live about 5 years longer than men across many countries, but it also emphasizes that this is not only about gender. It is influenced by income, access of healthcare, education, and environment. So I want you to write this down. Health is not just personal, it's social. For example, someone with access to regular healthcare is more likely to detect problems early. So let me repeat that again. Someone with access to regular health care is more likely to detect problems early. Someone without access may not receive care until the conditions become serious. The book is helping us to see that health is shaped by larger system as well. Okay. At this point, the book encourages us to connect this information to our own lives. So I want you to pause and think. What are you doing that supports your health? And what are you doing that might be harming it? For example, think about sleep, stress, eating habits, or physical activity. This is where the connect becomes personal. So if you're taking notes, write down one behavior you want to improve. The book highlights exercise as one of the most important health behaviors. It reduces risk of cardiovascular disease, it improves mental health, and increases life expectancy. But the book also reminds us that knowing something is healthy is not the same as doing it. So I want you to think about this, okay? What makes it hard for people to exercise consistently? Is it time? Is it motivation? Is it stress environment? This is where psychology helps us understand behavior. The book explains that obesity is linked to several health risks, including heart disease and diabetes. Excuse me. But it also emphasizes that obesity is influenced by many factors. It is lifestyle, environment, stress, and emotional patterns. For example, the book discusses how people may eat in response of to stress or emotional discomfort. So again, physical health is connected to emotional health. Think about how habits form over time, right? So let me read the example again. The book discusses how people may eat in response to stress or emotional discomfort. This is very common when we are um, when we're not aware, right? When we disconnect the emotional with the feelings, right? And we are stressed or something happens and we rather just have an ice cream, right? When we break up with our boyfriend or girlfriend and, we start eating stuff. So it's just a response to the stress or emotional discomfort. And we just need to be aware of all these emotional patterns that we're having. So these habits form over time, whether they're positive or negative. The book also explains that um, alcohol use varies by gender. Men, for instance, are more likely to engage in heavy drinking and binge drinking. Excessive alcohol use increases risk of disease and accidents. So I want you to think about this, right? Is alcohol being used socially or as a way of cope with the stress? The book really encourages us to look at both behavior and the reasons behind it. So I'm inviting you to understand this about alcohol because there has been so many accidents and the reports indicate that a lot of people just drink alcohol as a way of coping with the stress versus just in a social gathering. But the book really wants us to understand the behavior and the reason behind it, as well as, the book identifies smoking as a major health risk linked to serious diseases. Drug use is also connected to both physical and mental health outcomes. But again, the book reminds us to look at context. Stress, trauma, and environment often influence these behaviors. So instead of just labeling behavior, we try to understand it. Before we move on, I really want us to pause here for a moment and talk to you about something that is not always directly written in the book, but is incredibly important, and that is self-awareness. Because everything we just talked about, exercise, eating habits, alcohol, smoking, and other behaviors, is just not about knowledge. Most people already know what is healthy and what is not. The real challenge here, you guys, is awareness. Self awareness means being honest with yourself about your patterns, your habits, and the reasons behind them. For example, asking yourself, am I doing this because it's good for me or because I'm stressed, tired, or trying to cope with something? When you become aware of your behavior without judging yourself, you create the opportunity to change it. That is when emotional intelligence comes in. It's not about being perfect. It's about noticing your triggers, your choices, and your habits. So I want to invite you to do something simple. Just to start paying attention to one habit this week, okay, and observe it. Don't try to change everything at once. Just notice it because awareness is always the first step before change. And once you see your patterns clearly, you begin to have the power to choose different. I just really wanted to mention that because we're really learning about all this um, information, and I want us to be aware, and learn a little bit about self-awareness. Okay, so we're gonna move on to marriage, and this is when the book explains that people in healthy relationships often experience better health outcomes. What do you guys think about it, right? But it also makes it clear that quality matters more than status. So a supportive relationship can definitely reduce the stress and improve well-being. An unhealthy one can increase the stress. So I want you to think about the difference. Okay. And then the book also discusses how divorce affects men and women differently. Men may experience more financial stress, but often have a stronger support network. The book is showing us how gender roles shape experiences. So another one is parenting. The book explains how parenting can be both rewarding but also stressful. Women are more likely to take on caregiving roles, and these can affect the stress levels, time, and mental health. So again, roles influence health outcomes. Very important to remember. Now, The book describes and I'm not pronouncing it right? Bereavement as one of the most stressful life events. So this is men often experience stronger negative health effects after losing a spouse. And this is often related to loss or emotional support. So connection plays a key role in health. Okay. So let me say a little bit more about bereavement. Okay. So even though the book describes bereavement as one of the most stressful life events person can experience, bereavement refers to the loss of a loved one, especially a spouse or partner, as I mentioned a little before. According to your book, this kind of loss doesn't just affect people emotionally, it also affects physical health. The book also explains that after losing a partner, people may experience higher levels of stress, changes in sleep, loss of appetite, fatigue, and even increased risk for illness. In some cases, there is even increased risk of mortality shortly after the loss, especially for older adults. So I want you to pause and really understand this. Loss affects the whole person, not just emotions. Now, something very important that the book highlights is that men and women may experience bereavement differently and often experience stronger negative health effects after losing a spouse. So, men, men often experience stronger negative health effects after losing a spouse. I've known people that after their wives passed away, men just last like a week. It's very interesting. And one of the reasons for this, according to the book, is that men are more likely to rely on their partner as their main source of emotional um, support. So when that support is gone, they may feel more isolated and may struggle more with coping. Women, on the other hand, often have broader social support networks such as friends, family, or community connections, which can help them cope with their loss with the loss. But that doesn't mean that the loss is easier. It just means that the support system may look different. Okay, so let me give you a real example. Imagine someone who has spent many years depending on their partner, not only for emotional support, but also for daily routines, meals, and companionship. When that person is gone, everything changes. There is emotional pain, but also loneliness, changes in routine, and sometimes even a loss of purpose. Now, think about someone who, in addition to their partner, also has close friends, siblings, or a strong support system. They will still experience grief, but they may have more people to lean on during that process. So I want you to write this down. Social support plays a huge role in how people cope with loss. And this connects directly to what we talked about earlier with coping and stress, right? Bereavement is not just an emotional experience, it's a psychological, social, and physical experience. And I want you to think about this. If connection is such an important part of health, what happens when that connection is suddenly gone? This is why relationship matters so much in health psychology. Now let's talk about stress response. And this one comes directly from chapter one. I'm sorry, chapter nine in your book. The book explains that stress is not just something you feel emotionally, it's something your body experiences physically. When your brain perceives a threat, or pressure, your body automatically activates and is called the stress response, also known as the fight or flight response. So I want you to write this down. Stress is both psychological and physiological. What that means is that your thoughts and your environment can trigger a physical reaction in your body. According to the book, when stress is activated, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes faster, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and this really prepares your body to respond quickly. Now, in the short term, this can actually be helpful. For example, if you're about to take an exam, give a presentation, or react to something unexpected, stress can help you stay alert and focused. But the book also explains that the problem is not stress itself. The problem is chronic stress. Chronic stress means that your body stays in that activated state for long periods of time, and over time, this can negatively affect your health. For example, the book discusses how chronic stress can lead to sleep problems, fatigue, weakened immune system, high blood pressure, and increases risk for anxiety or depression. So I want you to think about this difference. Short-term stress, like feeling nervous before a test, can actually help you perform. But long-term stress, like constant pressure from work, finances, and relationships, can slowly wear your body down. Let me give you a real life example, okay? Imagine a student who feels stressed before an exam, studies, takes a test, and then stress goes away. That is normal and even helpful. Now, imagine someone who feels stressed every day, worrying about money, worrying about family problems or school, and never really gets a break. That is chronic stress. And that is where we start to see negative health effects. So I want you to write this down. Short-term stress can help you function. Chronic stress can harm your health. And this is why understanding stress is so important, because it's not just about how you feel, it's about how your body is being affected over time. Okay, so now let's talk about coping strategies, and this is something your book explains very clearly in chapter 9. Coping is how we respond to stress. So it's not just about the stress itself, it's about what we do when we feel stressed, overwhelmed, pressure, or emotionally affected. The book explains that there are two main types of coping. The first one is problem-focused coping. This means that you're trying to deal directly with the source of the stress. So I want you to write that down. Problem-focused coping equals solving the problem. So for example, let me give you an example. Um, if you stress because you have too many assignments, let's think about problem-focused coping would be creating a schedule, organizing your time, and asking your professor questions or breaking your work into smaller steps. You're taking action to reduce the stress, correct? So the second type of is emotion-focused coping. This means that you're managing how you feel about the situation. So write this down. Emotion-focused coping equals managing your emotions. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you might talk to a friend, take a break, listening to music, pray, journal, do something that helps you calm down. Now, something very important that the book wants you to understand is this: neither one is wrong. Both types of coping are necessary. It depends on the situation. So, if you can change the problem focused coping is very helpful. If you cannot change the situation right away, then emotion focused coping helps you to regulate your feelings so you can function. So let me give you a clear example. Imagine you fail an exam. Problem focus coping would be reviewing your mistakes, studying differently, or even asking for help, right? And emotion focused coping would be managing the disappointment, calming yourself down, and not being too hard on yourself. You actually need both. You do. Now, here's where I want you to really reflect. The book gives you the categories, but now I want you to think about your own patterns. When you feel stressed, what do you usually do? Do you take action or you avoid it? Do you talk to someone or you do keep everything inside? Because coping is not just something that we can learn once. It's something that we practice and improve over time. And I want you to write this down. Coping is a skill. It can be learned and strengthened. And it is where your self-awareness becomes very important. Here it is where your self-awareness become very important because once you notice how you respond to stress, then you can begin to choose healthier ways to cope. Okay, so now that we understand coping, the book helps um the book helps us to see the difference between healthy and unhealthy coping. And this is very important because not all coping actually helps in the long term. So I want you to write this down. Healthy coping supports your well being over time. Unhealthy coping may feel good in the moment, but can harm you later. The book gives examples of healthy coping like exercise, talking to someone, problem solving, or taking time to calm yourself. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you might go for a walk, talk to a friend, or organize your tasks. And healthy coping includes things like avoiding the problem, isolating yourself, or using substance to escape. For example, ignoring assignments or distracting yourself instead of addressing the situation. That's a good one. And it may feel better in the moment, but the stress is still there later. So I want you to think about this. When you feel stressed, what do you usually do? And is it helping you in the long run? Because the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to become aware and choose better ways to cope over time. So, as we begin to wrap up this unit, I want to highlight a few key takeaways from your book. The first one is this: health is not just biological. Your book shows us that health influenced by your behaviors, your environment, your relationships, and how you manage stress. The second takeaway is that gender plays an important role. Men and women experience health, stress, and help seeking differently, and those patterns can impact long term outcomes. And finally, your daily habits matter more than you think, right? Small choices like how to cope with the stress, how you take care of your body, and how and who you surround yourself with can shape your health over time. So I want you to remember this. Health is not just something that happens to you. Again, health is not something that just happened to you. It's something that you influence every day through your actions and awareness. Health is not something that just happens to you. It is something that you influence every day through your actions and awareness. Okay, so before we finish, I want to invite you to pause for a moment and reflect. After everything we talked about in this unit, I want you to ask yourself, what is one small change I can make this week to improve my health? It could be something simple, getting more sleep, managing stress a little better, moving your body, or reaching out to someone for support. As a matter of fact, I want to stretch. Oy. Remember, change doesn't have to be big to be meaningful. It starts with awareness. And I'm a strong person in awareness because I want to encourage you to use your notes as you complete your activities and discussions. Okay, this is your opportunity to connect what you learn from the book to your own life. So take this seriously, reflect, and engage with your classmates because that's where your learning becomes real. And as always, remember that having a great attitude is a very important tool. Okay. Thank you guys for today. Send me an email, a chat under mslomeli26@gmail.com if you have any questions. Um, but I'm going to be looking out for your discussion answers, and I can't wait to be part of it. And I want to hear what you have to say. And if you have any questions like, I couldn't see, I couldn't read, I haven't received anything or anything at all, just let me know. I'm here. Thank you so much, you guys. And I'm here for you, okay? Take care.